Thank you for coming back. Some people might think it's 7:30 instead of 7, but we're ready to start. And we're just so thankful that this has been a blessed Sabbath day. But I just wanted to say one more last thing from my standpoint, and that is I really appreciate the music this weekend. If you've appreciated the music this weekend, I want you to thank our new president, Patty Guthrie, because she has arranged all of the music for this entire weekend, and it's just been wonderful. Thank you so much, Patty. We really appreciate it, and we know that we're going to have a wonderful ASI next year because she's in charge. And so haven't you all been thankful also for this beautiful campus? I want to say thank you to all of Weimar staff and all of the people, some of whom haven't even been able to come to the meetings because they're preparing food for us and making sure we have our rooms and all of that. It's just been a blessing. Tonight, we do have just one change on the program. I just wanted to let you know that. First of all, this is the last night that most of our booths will be open, so please, those of you who don't have other duties, after our meeting, go back and see them all again at least one more time and get the blessing of all of their ministries. And secondly, or maybe that's thirdly, Dr. Nedley is going to be talking about the problem, why we're having so much problem with the young generation X, Y, and Z or whatever, because several people have asked him, why is it that young people are leaving the church so readily and things like that. So after the Members in Action, which we were planning just to do Members in Action and that was it, we are going to have a short presentation on that, and I hope you will enjoy that. Everything else will proceed as scheduled after that. And Todd Guthrie will be doing our Members in Action tonight. Can we bow our heads for a word of prayer? Thank you, Lord, for this wonderful Sabbath day, the beautiful nature, the wonderful program, the wonderful meetings that we've heard, all of the speakers, and the ones that are to come. I pray you'll bless our evening tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, John, come on up. I want to start off with, can you hear me on either of these? Both? Yeah, good. I'll give one to him. So this is Dr. John, is that right, John?
Yes, Westerdahl.
And John, we did some walking yesterday. We're talking about some of your background. The reason I wanted to highlight John at this point is that, how many ASIs have you been to, John?
This is my first one.
Yeah, so this is Members in Action, one of our newest almost members, or maybe he signed up last night.
You got to give me the application.
Yeah, so. Online application. You can go online anyway.
Oh, okay.
So, John, what's your line of work? What do you do?
I'm a nutritionist and registered dietitian. I have a PhD in health education, nutrition, registered dietitian, nutritionist, a certified nutrition specialist, and board certified anti-aging health practitioner.
Now, you've worked with some doctors that might be familiar, the names might be familiar to some people.
Yes, well, I worked with Dr. John McDougall. I first got acquainted with him when I worked at Castle Medical Center in Hawaii, which we can talk a little bit about. And I actually was he and I had a radio show together in Hawaii. And later on, I was director of nutrition for his food company. Some of you may have seen the Dr. McDougall Right food products, the little cups that you put boiling water and make.
So you're helping to make those foods be nutritionally balanced and healthy and all of that.
Right.
Good. So at Castle, what did you do at Castle Memorial Hospital?
Well, at Castle Medical Center, I was actually there 2 lives. After I finished my graduate work at Loma Linda University, I had to do some dietetic work and experience, and they said, how'd you like to go to Hawaii and do some work over there? And I said, sure. So I was there 2 weeks, and they offered me a position. I was there through the 80s for about 7 years, and then came back to Castle in a lot of the 2000s up to 2007, and was the director of wellness and lifestyle medicine, as well as the director of nutrition there.
So you weren't just planning meals for the patients, you were community wellness,
lifestyle medicine. While I was over there also, I was the Health and Temperance Secretary for the Hawaii Conference of Seventh-day Adventists too.
So one little connection you may not know, but when he left that job, he tried to recruit someone to take his job, and they ended up doing something else. Who was that person?
I was trying to recruit your brother.
Okay. My brother
George Guthrie, who's the president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which I am also very active in.
So
too.
what are your duties there? What do you
Well,
do?
I have been a board member there. I'm one of the founding members, but for the last several years, I plan all the meals for this conference. We had over 700 doctors there last time, and they're all very similar to what we're having here. It's completely, totally plant-based and very healthy meals, and that's a shock to some doctors because you have a lot of medical doctors coming from all over. And it's interesting to hear the doctors say, boy, I've never gone this long without meat in my life. But they didn't miss it.
Well, that's good.
Because the food was
practical training for them. So,
right.
So ASI members, ministries, that's one thing. Professionals, that's another. We all team together, to work. So this is your first ASI. Have you gotten any new thoughts, or you're a consultant now, right? You've got a consulting business.
I'm a nutrition consultant. I do private nutrition counseling. I do counseling for, I also give lectures and seminars in your local Adventist churches when they call me to do that. And I also have a national radio talk show called Health and Longevity. You
on
can get
Life Talk Radio,
Yeah,
was it?
Life Talk Radio. You can get information on that.
Okay.
It's on every week. It was on Friday. It's going to be on tomorrow again. And I have a lot of different interesting guests on the program, and I keep everyone up to date on the latest information on nutrition, longevity, anti-aging, all the things people want to know about.
So in your programs, then, is there a link in your thoughts between the nutrition and the whole spiritual health component? Is there a link
Sure.
going?
I think, first of all, we know as Christians that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we need to take care of them and not put bad things in our body and corrupt these bodies. And, the scriptures tell us that whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. And I have done, just recently, I've done 3 different It Is Written television programs. One was on Healthcare God's Way. The one that was just a few weeks ago was on healing foods from the Bible. And then if you watch It Is Written on May 13th, I'm going to be on anti-aging secrets from the Bible. But there's and we go into that in detail, but yes, I think the food that we eat is very important.
Well, Lord bless your ministry. We're so glad that you're coming on board with ASI. We hope to see you many more times.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to ask some of my friends Jim and Faye to come up. Come on up, folks. Jim Castillo and Faye Castillo. You notice anything different about these folks just on first glance? So we were attending the same church. And then they moved. So Jim, tell me a little bit about your background. Is this like a costume, or what is this?
No, I was involved with outlaw motorcycle activity most of my life. Done 3 prison terms, and during my last prison term, a guy in my cell just started witnessing to me about the love of Jesus, and my dear wife here had been arrested with me. And a simple short prayer. Lord, I know I messed up, but could you please get Faye out of here? And the next day when I called my house, I guess who answered the phone? She said, who were you expecting to be here? I said, last night I prayed you to get out of jail. She said, I got out last night, I just walked in the door. So, the Lord answered a prayer for us, and it got us on the path to learning about the Seventh-day Adventist Church while I was in prison. And then when I got out, we got involved with Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry.
So the motorcycles, it's like the love of money is the root of all evil, right? But money is not the root of all evil.
That's right.
So a motorcycle gang may not be a good thing, but a motorcycle itself. Okay, so you're in tell us what is your ministry? What is it?
Okay, our ministry involves, let me tell you how it started. In 1997, 3 people were sitting in a Hollister Seventh-day Adventist church, and in Hollister they have a huge event there. And they were thinking, we'll never get the bikers in here, let's take the church to them. So it's 3 people dressed up like this, went out with their literature and just started handing out literature at the event. And it went over so well that they decided the next year to get a booth there. And they've been there every year that they have a Hollister event, hand out literature there. We go to, this year we went to Daytona Beach. Sturgis.
So the big events are what? Daytona, Sturgis, and Hollister?
Laughlin
Okay.
is going on this weekend. Reno.
And the
Street
name of the
vibration.
ministry is?
Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry.
That's right.
And
Amen.
I'm the president of the Northern California chapter. Faye is the secretary of our chapter, also the national chapter. So
So the national chapter, the national organization's office is in
Hollister,
in
California.
Hollister, California. That's in our union. So that organization needs to become a member of the Pacific Union ASI, right? We were talking about that.
And you know what's great about this is when we go to these big events, okay, we have this little 10 by 10 booth. And at Sturgis in 2015, estimated attendance there was 1.2 million people. Wow. So, you know, to hand out thousands of pieces of literature, children.
How many of us were there?
That year there were 28 of us.
How did you get it up there? How did you get all the literature out there?
Okay, we take our truck, we load up a trailer, put the motorcycle in there, and we head off. We get there a couple of days early to set up, scope out the land, and we have a great time intermingling, because I see a lot of people there that I have known in the past, and I say, what happened to you? Well, here, let me tell you about it. Praise God.
The Lord got a hold of you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you that Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry is recognized by the World Church, and we are a recognized ministry within the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Good. Yeah, wonderful. Well, tell us a story of someone you met that their life was changed through this ministry.
Okay. We went to right local, Redding, California, from where we live, and we're next to the Christian Motorcycle Association. And there's a guy sitting in the booth. His name is Gene. I met him one year, and then the next year he was there again. And one day he comes walking up to the booth and he said, "Hey, can we have a talk?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Well, come on, let's go." So he wanted to get away from his booth. And he goes, "How do you feel about lifting up one another, taking care of your brothers?" I said, "Well, the Bible says to esteem others better than yourself." He goes, "Okay, well, let's go for a walk." So we went for a walk, and he had questions about the Bible on the Sabbath. So basically, for pretty close to an hour, we stood next to the building away from his group and had a Bible study on the Sabbath. Amen. And when he got through all that with me, he went back to his booth, and he said, "Hey, I want to start checking out your guys' ministry." Well, eventually, he through Bible studies, he became a Seventh-day Adventist. Amen. He sent back his Sunday keeping patch, and he became a Sabbath keeper.
Still on the motorcycle, though?
He doesn't ride.
He doesn't ride?
Yeah.
Okay.
But now he is training to be an associate pastor or a junior pastor under one of the pastors in the Anderson Church. So he is very active within the church and doing ministry.
Lord bless your ministry. Thank you
you
for sharing with us.
Thank you for letting us be here.
So another rough and tumble, the urban ministry. Come on up, Chef Chu. So we'll plug you in here. We'll see if we can get some display going. You got it? Okay. So that's your real last name.
Yeah, my real last name is Chu. That's right.
That's right.
Everybody calls me Chef Chu.
So how did you get into being a chef?
Yeah, so everybody calls me Chef Chu. I like to say, as I always say, going to give you something to chew on. And so amazingly, I had this last name Chu, and I was actually adopted. And somehow I found out that my calling was actually cooking. I actually became a missionary in 2001. I was cooking for a missionary team and had this gift of cooking. And it kind of matched my last name and kind of all worked out.
I think the Spirit of Prophecy says that may be one of the most important gifts.
Yes, she says it's more than 10 talents.
More than 10 talents.
So yeah, absolutely.
Well, praise the Lord. So you've gotten involved in ministry, though, with your talent. Tell us about how that happened. How did that come about?
Yeah, again, I started out in 2001 as a missionary doing colporteuring. We took it from there, started actually selling food door to door, bringing healthy food options to people's homes. From there, I actually had an amazing experience. I started learning how to make my own plant protein products. So I actually make something called Better Chew Chicken. So it looks like chicken, tastes like chicken, but guess what? It ain't chicken. Crispy on the outside and white in the middle. It's delicious. And so I started experimenting. Believe it or not, Ellen White said that God will give the Holy Spirit to those who want to learn how to make meatless proteins. And I read those statements literally like almost 13, 14 years ago and believed it, and I've been able to create some amazing plant protein products. And so I got some pictures coming up, I guess, if it comes in. So
there's a little delay, so if you just leave it alone, Daniel
yeah.
tells us that it'll eventually come up, the HDMI thing. So, well, we met, I think, was it 2012? You were at the ASI?
Yes.
And where was that?
I was in Cincinnati. I was a pastor in Arkansas, and I also had a restaurant in Arkansas. And so I actually learned how to create restaurants and use it as a missionary model for communities. And at that ASI, I met the Northern California Conference, an individual that worked there. And from that experience, they invited me to come to Oakland to start a vegan restaurant in Oakland. And we started that restaurant back in 2016.
And what's the name of that restaurant?
It's called the Veg Hub.
The Veg Hub. So tell us about the Veg Hub ministry. What is incorporated in this ministry? What do you do?
Yeah, so the Veg Hub is it's a plant-based, amazing vegan restaurant in the city of Oakland. It's actually a partnership with the Northern California Conference. We had an initiative called Bridges to Oakland. We wanted to actually have a model in the community where we provide free education to the community, cooking classes. Every person that comes in, we treat them like family.
You got pictures now.
Yeah, there you go. So we sell like some of the most amazing vegan food products. We got something called a vegan Philly cheese steak. And so with that allows us to...
Who said yes?
Yes, there's a vegan Philly cheesesteak, and so what we're doing, we're actually helping meat eaters, people that are actually eating meat on a daily basis, people that are going to Popeyes and KFC and all these different places. They're coming to the Veg Hub, and they taste our products, and they're literally blown away, and it's amazingly because they're transitioning into eating less protein.
You don't lose any vegans the other direction, do you? By
Not actually, no.
Reality.
Well, some people kind of get, I guess a good point, some people kind of get shocked that it has a texture that's so similar to meat, but yeah, absolutely, I see what you're saying. But it's actually helping people who eat meat to transition. And I think that's something that's very needed in society, especially in communities where a lot of people are dying from heart disease and diabetes and et cetera, et cetera.
Now, you've had some spiritual interests out of this. Tell us about that.
So what we do at our restaurant, we actually do Bible studies. My little son is here. So we do Bible studies. We actually have Friday night programs with the young adults from the different churches locally. We actually have young people now coming to church as a result of the ministry that we've been doing. And so what it does is actually it's a relationship builder. You figure in a restaurant setting, you're meeting hundreds of people every single week, and these customers come back week in and week out. And so as a result of that, you're building bridges and relationships that leads to spiritual conversations, spiritual intimate conversations. And so I can count, so many amazing experiences. I've had people that's been baptized as a result of restaurant ministry.
Excellent.
So it really, really is an entering wedge.
Now, I'm sure you've read the Spirit of Prophecy on restaurant ministry in the inner
Absolutely.
city and
that's my game
the beehive type model.
That's it, man.
And one of the challenges was, we read that she says, how can this be financially viable, right?
There you go.
That was one of the concerns and one of the problems that actually caused issues in the past. So,
yes.
So how's it going?
It's actually amazing right now. Believe it or not, that's, working with the church and obviously a conference is something that's, a restaurant seems like very daunting. We're actually almost at a break-even point in less than almost about 18 months. So the restaurant's doing really amazing. Which, if you don't know anything about the plant protein and what's happening right now, the world is literally, the rocks are crying out. You have, major companies, major investors are investing into plant protein. And so right now, like our product that we manufacture, for example, we've gotten a purchase order from Whole Foods to go into 43 stores. And so right now, the world is like really seeing the possibilities because people are realizing that meat is unsustainable. Something that our prophet said in 1900. Yeah. And they're saying to us that, guess what, meat is unsustainable. And so right now there's a push with tech companies to create the future of protein. And so right now, our church is sitting on a gold mine that we've had. I like to say we kind of got stuck in a can. And I believe that, so much opportunity. I got some friends over there, Chantry and Sean. They do farmers markets selling smoothies in the Bay Area. But we both are experiencing that people want healthy food products. And it's a great time for missionary work for us to go out into our communities, selling great products and so forth. And so the timing couldn't be better. And it pays. It's financially viable, I guess to say that. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. Lord bless you in your ministry.
Amen.
And next I'm going to call up Danny Kwan, and we'll plug him in, see if he can have the same success, Daniel. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Life and Health Network. Anybody heard of Diabetes Undone? A few people have. Anybody done it in their church? Okay, it's a good idea to do. Well, tell us, Danny, a little bit about, let's see, what is Life and Health Network? What do you got going?
Life and Health Network is a media ministry. We're a ministry that produces primarily a lot of free resources, a website. We have books, DVDs, and it's designed to be a website that anyone can use, whether you're a doctor or a Bible worker or just a layperson in your church, where you can share the health message, where you can count on all the information being in there consistent with the Bible and the spirit of prophecy.
Excellent. Okay. So what are some of the features of Life and Health Network? Like, how broad is this? What are the resources
Okay, so primarily we have two websites. We have lifeandhealth.org, which is our English-based website, and there's dozens and dozens of articles, videos, almost 200 cooking videos on plant-based diet and lifestyle. We address physical health as well as mental health. And we also have a Spanish website called saludesvida.org, and that mirrors most of our English content, but it's in Spanish, and we have videos in Spanish and health videos, and that's something that there's not a lot of in the world. So you started developing, I said we, see I slipped there. This says President Life and Health Network, which is actually a role I'm filling right at the moment, but I'm going to do this interview anyway. Okay, there's the website. It's not for profit, so there's no real conflict of interest, I guess you would say. As they describe it. So we developed these videos for cooking, and then something morphed out of that. What started happening? So we decided we would make a cookbook, and so I'll just advance the slides here. And this is Saludes Vida, and so it's called Plant to Plate, From Plant to Plate. We have this cookbook as well as another one called From Plant to Plate Diabetes Edition, and that one is oil-free, sugar-free. And what's unique about this cookbook is that, as well as having nice pictures and recipes, we have at the bottom there a QR code. So if you, so each recipe, and we've got over 120 recipes.
So there's the
in this
QR
cookbook.
code, okay.
If you scan the QR code, it'll take you to a video that's only like a minute and a half long that shows you how to cook the recipe. And what we found is that, the Spirit of Prophecy tells us one of the missions of health evangelism is to simplify health, to simplify what it means to eat healthy. And so by showing people how to cut an avocado, for example, the first time I cut an avocado, I practically cut my fingers off, and I just had this mush, right? But if you see in a short video how to cut it, it actually is very instructive as well. So this makes a great gift.
So a cookbook, a diabetes edition, and then what came out of that? We have this program called
Diabetes Undone.
Diabetes Undone.
Right. So we realized that diabetes, educating somebody on how they can reverse diabetes through lifestyle changes, which most of us know about, how to package it into a program that people can watch at home, because not everyone can go to an 18-day New Start program. And so when we created that, from that came this intense desire for churches to create a group program for churches.
And actually that arose out of the free clinics, the need for a follow-on program, right? And we kind of developed it on the fly for after, was it San Antonio Pathways or something?
Yes.
And several churches did this. So now we have this group edition. What does the group edition look like?
Well, let me show you a short little video that'll kind of describe it, if we have any sound.
Do we have sound?
Diabetes. But that doesn't have to be the case in your community. Diabetes can actually be undone, and you can help to facilitate that change. Diabetes Undone Group Edition is a scientifically proven diabetes reversal program that mobilizes the community to reverse their diabetes, prediabetes, and many other lifestyle diseases. The group edition of Diabetes Undone guides participants through an 8-session workshop to learn how to reclaim their health through nutrition, exercise, and other simple lifestyle changes. Anyone can start and facilitate a Diabetes Undone program, including you. This program comes with all the videos, materials, and even a script to fully equip you to easily facilitate every workshop. So don't hesitate. Be the change you want to see in your community and go to diabetesundone.com/groups to start a workshop today.
Great. So how many churches have done this?
We've have over 300 churches have run this program in the last couple of years.
And what's been the response?
You know, we've had great response. We've been really intentional about designing the program to build relationships between the church members and the participants that are coming. And there's Facebook groups that have popped up. People have stayed in touch. People are going to church. We've even had reports of baptisms happening as a result.
So, but one of the communities that really said, well, we need this for our community is what? What community? Another language group.
Oh, the Spanish community. But before we go there, I just want to also add that this is also really good for Bible workers, to even just one-on-one health coaching. So if you're looking for a curriculum, you can take this program and just one-on-one administer the 8 one-hour sessions and help somebody reverse their diabetes
Great, just
one-on-one.
like that home visit we were seeing.
Right.
So Pacific Union ASI
Yes.
gave us a grant. When was that?
Last year.
Last year, and what was that for?
It was to help translate this program into Spanish. The Spanish churches really have very little resources for group programs such as this and health evangelism, and yet we know through data that the Spanish community is at the most risk, is one of the highest risk groups for diabetes, and so this is something that we realized we have to translate into Spanish. So we received a grant from Pacific Union last year, and we refilmed the entire series with Dr. Casares, who is a Mexican-American medical doctor, and in native Spanish, we contextualized the entire program for the Spanish-speaking population.
So that's been done, you're saying?
It's been done, and
so you're reporting back to the Pacific Union?
Yes, we're reporting back.
ASI
It is now completed. It is up online. The individual course is up online. We have translated our workbook. We've created a Diabetes Undone cookbook with recipes that are for the Hispanic population, so it's not like just translated recipes.
Okay, 30 seconds. What are the new releases? What are the new projects for Life and Health Network?
We have an online course that's coming out on anxiety reversal, as well as moving to a plant-based diet on a low budget. So whether you're on SNAP assistance program, you can go to a plant-based diet. And these are programs that we are working on this year. Sleep disorders. And so we're all trying to change it to make the course and then make it into a group course that you can run in your church.
You can run in the church, small groups. I don't know if I'm going to put a plug in here for somebody who's not here, and that's Elvin Adams, who's I think of a member of Amen. But anybody heard of Elvin Adams? Read his handbook? So he's come out with a new book, Principles and Practice of Health Evangelism. One thing he's really pushing hard, and I think he's right, is small groups, church members as facilitators at the table, and then follow up during the week. And so whatever the disease process is we're trying to help, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and we're also doing one on grief, which is going to be together with the ministry.
That's right. Thank you for reporting that. Well, thank you, Danny, for giving us that good report. Now I'm going to invite my wife up, Patty and Vicki, come on up. This is a follow-on on the Diabetes Undone course because we did the course in our church, and we did the Diabetes Undone course in our church, and one of the people who came to the course was Vicki. So I'm going to let my wife interview her here, ask her to do that, and just tell us a little bit of the story of what happened and what some of the implications are of this story.
All right, Vicki, tell us where you're from originally.
Oh, I'm from Taiwan. Okay.
Yeah, she's from Taiwan. And a little bit about your background, just religious background, cultural, family.
Okay, I start search in Buddhism, but not really going to temple or something, just for search for their philosophy. quite a bit. And so, well, kind of just in that system, yeah. But then one day, I would call it a false sign that doctor said, you have diabetes. And I said, what? I was kind of freaked out because I saw people have to cut their legs off and all that. So I said, oh no, what am I going to do? And then at that time, a friend in our yoga class told me about Patty has this diabetes down. So I rushed over there. And then turned out, it's been 2 years, doctor never put me on medication. But I didn't really follow. I mean, I did cut down meat, cut down the sweet, but not totally. But still, doctor didn't put me on the medication. So I would say it's a false sign, just Holy Spirit want me to go to church. You have to meet with that Patty.
So we were doing the small groups, just like you're supposed to do with Diabetes Undone.
Right.
Vicki was at a table one evening. I was facilitating the group one evening, sat down at her table, and she asked a question.
Right. I don't remember all that details, but all I remember is I look at the Patty, and I said, oh, this is Christian. And she is so humble and so gentle, and I want to be like her. So that's the reason when she asked me if I want to study Bible, I say, oh, yeah. Okay.
No, this is funny. We have different memories. Of course, I didn't know what she was thinking, but she said to me, she just said to the table, does this church have Bible studies? And then Pat was sitting there, and she said, oh, yeah, you should get her to give you Bible studies. Remember? Anyway, so that kind of started things, and we did our diabetes follow-up on a Sabbath morning for breakfast. We had everyone come, and then we invited anyone who would like to stay for Sabbath school, and you did. In that quarter, we were studying the book of Job, and for the first time in the class, you opened the book of Job and read the story, and it answered a question for you about God.
Oh, yes, I remember now. That the Job stories really got me of continuous study, because I do feel in Buddhism they always say it's karma. You do something wrong, so you got plenty of karma, so you be in the bad situation. But with Job study, it really opened my mind. I said, oh, it can be a test. It can be
it may not be something you did personally.
Right.
There's bigger issues.
Right. So I feel, well, there's something in Bible, the teaching in the Bible is really different than Buddhism teaching. Of course, I don't want to deny the Buddhism teaching. They got a great philosophy. But still, the Bible has something that cover what Buddhism does not cover it.
Yeah. So for the last year and a half or so, we've been getting together for Bible study.
Yes, right. Every week, as long as I'm in town and Patty's in town. And I want to say, my husband's still at Buddhism, but he doesn't reject me to go study Bible, because he saw me change a little bit. I have less yelled at him.
So Vicki's made a decision. I think we've asked if you'd be interested in being baptized in the future. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't know, because the baptized seems a lot of responsibility for being a Christian.
She's not sure she's ready, and I said, well, that's Jesus' responsibility. He's going to do the work we can't do. So just tell one last thing. You're a part of a Bible study, or not a Bible study, you're part of a study group, and Chinese, of course, is your first language. You want to tell them briefly about your study group?
We have this group for many years, but we basically are the people are not into religious, but we wanted to search for the truth, for the spiritual truth, but nobody wanted to belong to any religious church or temple or any system. So we kind of go over all kind of different studies and just kind of everybody share. But I recently found that I begin to sneak God and Jesus into them. Yes, because when they ask a question, I kind of say a little bit about it. and they can accept this because they know I'm not religious fanatic, so they accept it.
Praise God.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask Christina Carr to come up. There are a lot of different ways we can be involved in ministry, and we'll see if the display happens here. I'll give you this. There you go. And the homeschool classroom. You have children?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you come to be in a homeschool classroom? What happened?
Well, my two boys who are now ending their sophomore year here at Weimar Academy, years ago we were homeschooling them, and we had trouble with them, and they were homeschooling actually in my husband's office for a while, and they got into a lot of mischief, and it wasn't working out real well. And the final straw was when one of my sons learned how to bend a paperclip so it fit in a socket, and it zapped the power. And he, we said, you could have electrocuted yourself. And he said, oh no, wood doesn't conduct electricity, because he pushed it in with a pencil. So he thought he was being smart, but we said, well, wood can catch on fire, Anyway, they were getting into a lot of mischief there. I had to work 3 days a week, and so they were there. So anyway, we found a school there locally, a Christian school that had 10 students, and we put them in that school. At the end of that year, we realized that wasn't the best place for them. So we decided to take them out. But meanwhile, at the picnic at that school at the end of the year, a couple of parents came to me and started asking, what church do you go to? What religion are you? And they started asking questions about our faith. They said they were really impressed with our boys at the school and the influence that they had on their children. And so in the process of that, I actually, one of them kept calling me with questions, and so I referred them to Patty, who did Bible studies with them. And then they asked, where are your boys going to school next year? And I said, well, I'm going to homeschool them. And so they were very disappointed. They decided to homeschool too. Well, during that time, I found out they're in Mount Shasta. There's actually 200 homeschoolers up there, all doing different things, trying to find a place for their kids, and all looking for something social even for them. So I decided to, actually the Lord impressed upon me to start a homeschooling group. So these families, or 3 families that joined together, and 5 kids that first year, all boys. And so we started homeschooling together. And at that time, do you want me to go
So where
this
did
far?
you meet?
Because I have a lot
meet?
to say. Where did we meet?
Where did you have the homeschool?
Okay, so we had the homeschool group at our church.
So how did you pick that? I mean,
Because the church was used to have a school there, and but because of financing, we had to close the school down. So we actually have a wonderful classroom and a playground, and it's a great place to meet.
so tell us about what's your homeschool classroom like at the church. So the church is essentially a center of influence for people with young children that want to
Christian,
school them in a safer
and
environment.
actually, it's by word of mouth, and it's Christian families that we're actually looking at. The second year that we did this, we actually had more people interested. And then we had like 9, and then I stopped doing it because I had to work more for my kids to go to Weimar. And during
There's
that
tuition
year,
at Weimar, yes.
during that year when I took that year off, the parents all did something different, and they weren't happy with their options there in the community. They asked me, please restart the school up. I prayed about it, and so this is what we're doing now.
So show us some pictures. What's happening there?
Okay, so this is our classroom. We have 13 students, grades K through 7 this year. And we
What's that in the
meet-
back?
Oh, well, I'll tell you about
You'll
that
tell that
in a
later,
minute.
okay.
Yeah. We meet 3 days a week, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday from 8 to noon, because I still do have to work. And I actually charge them a tutoring fee, because it's the only way that I can keep sending my kids to Weimar. So I charge them $200 a month. I didn't mean to tap that yet. A tutoring fee per student, and we work. Okay, so let me get into this. This is money.
Is that real
Our
money?
classroom works on a financial basis. Okay, this is play money. It looks more realistic, but it's tiny. The students come in when they come in. If they're on time, they get paid a salary. So the first person who gets there hands out the salary, and they actually get paid to hand it out. So the first person gets there gets $5, and then they hand out a salary. And the salary started off with $1, and then every month we increased by 25 cents. And this helps the kids to learn their math with money. So we don't actually have to have class on money. If they get there at 8:01, school starts at 8. If they're at 8:01, they don't get paid. And we had a lot of tears the first couple weeks of school because they thought they should get paid. And so I had parents calling me, and I said, well, okay, if you give me a good excuse, I said, but I'm trying to teach timeliness. Are you brushing your teeth? Are you having to be told? Are you need to help to be on time as well as the parents. And so the parents finally went along with it. It took a little bit. They get paid for turning in homework, oral reports, kindness, as you see there. But then they would lose income if they were rude, unkind, me first, and then there's other things that developed along the way.
So we're building in some self-control.
With that money, then they would buy property. We have a board, I'll show you next. A property, if they didn't want to buy property or have a house, then they could do an apartment rental. They would buy house, car, insurance for their car and house. And I told them that if I come in and say there's been a flood and you don't have insurance, you lose your house. And then you have to start all over again, saving money for your house. And so the kids were so afraid they were going to lose their house that they made sure they had money for insurance as well before they bought their house. So, and they had electricity. If you didn't want to buy the lights, then you had no electricity in your house. We just recently did taxes, and there was other items they could buy. I taught them, and Patty taught them tithing, 10%, and with the tithe money, every dollar, they buy a brick to build a church. And they would have to rent recess equipment. So they would give me the money, they could take out the equipment, and they only got their money back if they brought the equipment back. They also got money for washing their hands in the bathroom, flushing toilets, kinds of things that children often forget to do. This is one of the properties that one of the kids bought, and that's a house they bought. They had an option to buy a house and paint it. We had Lego houses, brick houses. They could either build their house or buy one that was already made. And then this is one of the cars. And then this student also bought a motorcycle for Motorcycle Ministries.
Did they buy health insurance to go with that motorcycle?
We didn't do health insurance, maybe next year. We do have a hospital. Here's the board, and it looks a little cluttered here, but on the right-hand side, you'll see the brick building. That's the church that they have been building with their tithe and offering money, actually. So some of the kids will actually come up, I want 20 bricks, and because they want to see the church being built. We have a firehouse there and a hospital, all things that they would have to pay for. We have a jail. This we just instituted recently. So this kind of scared kids at first. Some of them wanted it, and then some of them were afraid. So if you kick somebody or do something unkind, then we have the judicial system. We have everybody picks a job per week. So we have a judge.
Now this is a school. This is a home school.
So the jury
life.
is a classroom, and the classroom would say, okay, this person is guilty, and then the judge would place the sentence. If the sentence was 5, then the student had the option to pay $5 to that person or spend 5 minutes in jail. So we do have people who choose the jail option. They think it's kind of fun, and then they try to break out. So we actually have police. There's police uniforms on the side of that. And anyway, moving on. I taught them ledgers. They know about debits and credits from kindergarten all the way through. So on the left, you'll see a kindergarten ledger, and on the right, you'll see the 7th grader. So they learned what some financial terms are. My husband is an accountant, and I've worked with him before. So we kind of, they have a check register, deposit slips here, and then here's a check. One student had to pay $5 because they wanted to go to jail, but this girl causes trouble in jail. So I said, no, you're going to pay this time. So she said, well, I don't have $5. I said, well, you can write a check. So she wrote a check to Mad Dog. His name is actually Maddox. Anyway, for $5. This is our income tax return. I actually had a 1040 easy that they filled out, and I adapted it for us. So they learned about what the different line items were, and then when their tithe and offering money that they gave, they got to deduct off of their income.
So I can see a New Beginnings homeschool co-op, I mean, it's amazing.
Every week our writing is a scripture. So I would write out the scripture for them to trace. We have 2 groups. Group 1 is K1 through 3, and grades K through 2. Group 2 is 3 to 7. And the upper graders will do cursive, because I believe that cursive is important. And then the younger ones will do print. And so that's why you see a print and a cursive letter at the top there, depending on what they're doing. We're also all learning ukulele, from the youngest to the oldest. So we don't sound real great, but it's a lot of fun. The kids they all know 4 chords, and you can do a lot of songs with 4 chords. And the pastor comes in and he does worship in the morning. Patty does Bible in the afternoon. And I've kind of weeded it into the program because out of the 13 kids, 2 are Adventist. The rest are not. So I wanted to get worship and Bible in there in such a way that the kids wouldn't come late and miss it or leave early and miss it. So I have writing and reports first, then we have worship. I have Bible before we end the day so that it gets kind of snuck in there. This is our garden. Part of our math was them building these raised beds. So they actually got to decide what they wanted to grow. Some of the kids wanted to grow kiwi, mango, and pineapple, and I said, I don't know about that. And then I thought, well, this is science. This is part of science. Okay, you figure out what kind of soil, what kind of atmosphere it needs, everything. And they designed their grow boxes. I brought in a saw, and I let them do the cutting in the building, and then they learned what kind of soil they needed. And so we actually have that tall one on the left is kiwi. The one just to the right of that is a pineapple. And then we also do have some more practical things like carrots and strawberries. And we actually have strawberries on our plants now.
It's like a mini
and
mobile
tomato.
medicine.
And so we have grow lights there. They're on a timer. So, and this is all inside my Sabbath school classroom, by the way. They also learned about the periodic table of elements. From the bottom one is a kindergartner, and the upper one is our 7th grader, I think, or 6th grader. So they picked what element they wanted to draw, and the atom there, and they learned about all that, and they learned about how to calculate the numbers and everything. This is where we do history and science. And we're doing U.S. history right now. And science, I started with creation. We read through creation, and then from there, picked up the periodic elements, and there, the plants and the growing, and went on from that. This is homework that I give them since we have school 4 days a week. On Friday, I send them home with this, reading, writing, and arithmetic. So they read for 30 minutes. I send home a math worksheet, which we use Saxon math. And then I pick something different for them to write reports on, usually something science or history. Okay.
And this is why it happened.
Why parents ask me.
It's a wonderful outreach.
They're looking for.
Can you franchise this?
I don't know. Can I?
Can ASI pick this up? Well, thank you for sharing with us. So what we'll do is, if you have questions, anybody who is wanting to homeschool or you want to explore this model a little more, talk to her afterward. You'd like to do this? You'd like to homeschool with her? You have a child who would like to join your school here.
I did have parents coming to me and said, I don't even know what a debit and credit is. I would like to go back and go to that myself, So thank you for sharing. So, wow, neat stories, neat ministries going on. They all want to homeschool with you. Okay, is Dr. Nedley here? Is he speaking to us? Do you see him? Has he gone virtual? What's the... Well, Stan, yes.
You mentioned if you'd like to get a hold of or find out more about Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry, you can go to skmmnational.org, and you'll find out all about our ministry there, where we go. And if you'd like to donate to our ministry, we need lots of literature. We appreciate that.
So all that literature you're hauling to these places takes money. So once Sabbath Keepers Ministries signs up as an ASI member, then we can include you maybe in the annual offering. So you can do an application and we can raise money for that. That's how this works, right, Lorraine? So, well, why don't we stand up? Let's sing a song, and we'll see if we can get Dr. Nedley in here by singing. What do you think? All right. So maybe my wife will play the piano. Does someone have a favorite hymn? Well, he's not on the list, but it was announced that somebody wanted him to speak about the XYZ generation that hasn't been to Christina Carr's homeschool. And what number? 633. 633. When we all get to heaven. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow nor a sigh. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of him in glory will the toils of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, soon his beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. All right, one more. One more. What number is that? This little light of mine. Oh, we don't need it. Have a seat. Happy Sabbath. So Dr. Neil Nedley is the president of Weimar Institute College, New Start, all things Weimar. Our last Members in Action, Neil, was about a homeschool co-op that incorporates real life experiences.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
So maybe it's part of the solution for what we're going to hear about.
Well, thank you very much. It's kind of interesting. Dr. Guthrie, Todd and I were classmates years ago at Loma Linda University, and Todd's and Patty's son and my son are best friends, also in medical school at Loma Linda, and they are almost inseparable. And although they live at different places, they kind of stay over each other's houses. And although Alan has 3 brothers, to not have to choose one over the other, William is going to be the best man in his wedding on June 10. And Patty was just telling me the other day, he told William, do you realize that you're going to get the big boot come June 10? And that means that, is Laura here? I don't think Laura isn't here. She was here earlier. But I mentioned that to Laura the other day, and she says, tell her thank you so much, because I wanted to make sure someone at least gave him a warning. So Let's see if I can find where we need to present here. Okay. One of the big questions is why the rapid rise in mental illness in our society today? And we're going to be hearing a lot more about the mental disorders, but they're particularly prevalent in Generation Y, Z, the millenniums, and the boomlets. I'm not sure why it's doing that to me. Oh, because I'm at the end of the presentation, not the beginning. There are 6 generations living in America today and in the world. We'll just go through the last 3. Generation X was born in 65 to 77, called the passed over generation. They believe the boomers got the stuff. And just so you'll be clear, I'm a baby boomer. I'm part of that boomer generation, so obviously I was born before that time. And those behind the boomlets get the attention, but the forgotten middle child is seen, they believe they're the Generation X. And they're the ones where truth became relative. No such thing as absolute truth for this generation. They also came home to an empty house because their boomer parents were both working. And so a lot of unsupervised time for the Generation Xers, and so television was major for them. The generation born from 77 to 95 is Generation Y. And this was comprising primarily of the children of the baby boomers, typically perceived as increasingly familiar with digital and electronic technology. And this is the generation that's called the Millennials. Why are they called the Millennials? They're a person reaching young adulthood around the year 2000. Millennials were considered the first global generation with the development of the internet. And now we have Generation Z, which are those born in 1995 and later. Other names for this generation: the post-millennials, the I generation, the founders, the plurals, or the homeland generation. And I wanted to know why they were called these things, and I looked up how were they named the founders. This is something that they named themselves. They wanted a name that was different than Generation Z. So they got together and they named themselves the founders, but nowhere in there did it tell us what they actually founded. So this generation makes up the largest percentage of the U.S. population. 25.9% of the people in America are part of this generation. And they contribute $44 billion to the American economy. But that's a large amount, but when you consider there's $19 trillion in the American economy, it's still a pretty small amount, but it's obviously going to get larger. By 2020, they will account for 1/3 of the U.S. generation. 40% of this generation admit to being addicted to their devices. Those are the ones that admit it. Do you think it's higher or lower than this? It's higher. 30% of millennials admit to being addicted to their devices. Generation Z is known, however, as the one generation that chose Instagram over Facebook. 62% of Generation Z anticipate challenges working with baby boomers or Generation Xers. So they say, we can't work with this generation. We don't really want them to be our bosses. However, only 5% think they'll have challenges working with millennials. So they feel much more bonded towards the millennial generation. In 2006, there were a record number of births in the United States. 49% of those births were born Hispanic, and the most common name in America changed from Smith to Rodriguez that year. Now, thoughts and feelings for a while were previously thought to only be sequestered in our skulls, and that, of course, is false. We now know they can be skewed by external forces we're not even aware of. The brain is a monitoring system as well as a thinking system. Its attention is drawn toward any object that is new, intriguing, or otherwise striking. And that's because it's not just a thinking system, but also a what? A monitoring system. Media and communication devices, from telephones to TV sets, have always tapped into this instinct. Media devices, whether turned on or switched off, they promise an unending supply of information and experiences. By design, they grab and hold our attention in ways natural objects never could. Out of all media devices, what is the one that stands out? The smartphone. Because the phone is packed with so many forms of information and so many useful and entertaining functions, it acts as what Dr. Ward calls a supernormal stimulus, one that can hijack attention whenever it is part of our surroundings, which it always is. By the way, I talked about supernormal stimuli the other day on Friday, for those of you who are here, in regards to the sex and sexual intimacy and what that does to the brain. But this is a supernormal stimulus in regards to the monitoring system, so it hijacks attention. Imagine combining a mailbox, a newspaper, a TV, a radio, a photo album, a public library, and a boisterous party attended by everyone you know, then compressing them all into a single small radiant object. That is what a smartphone represents to us. No wonder we can't take our minds off it. In 2015, a Gallup survey showed that more than half of iPhone owners said that they couldn't imagine life without the device. It's hard to imagine another product that has provided so many useful functions in such a handy form. But while our phones offer convenience and diversion, they also breed anxiety. Their extraordinary usefulness gives them an unprecedented hold on our attention and a vast influence over our thinking and behavior. So what happens to our minds when we allow a single tool such dominion over our perception and our cognition? Studies show as the brain grows dependent on technology, what weakens? The intellect weakens. Using a smartphone or even hearing one ring or vibrate produces distractions that makes it harder to concentrate on a difficult problem or job. The division of attention impedes reasoning and performance. When people's phones beep or buzz while they're in the middle of a challenging task, their focus wavers. Their work gets sloppier, whether they check the phone or not. When people hear their phone ring but are unable to answer it, their blood pressure spikes, their pulse quickens, and their problem-solving skills decline. This was an interesting study, pretty large study, 520 undergraduate students at University of California, San Diego. They were given 2 standard tests of intellectual acuity. One test gauged available cognitive capacity, a measure of how fully a person's mind can focus on a particular task. The second assessed fluid intelligence, a person's ability to interpret and solve an unfamiliar problem. The only variable in the experiment was the location of the subject's smartphones. Some of the students were asked to place their phones in front of them on their desks. Others were told to stow their phones in their pockets or handbags. Still others were required to leave their phones in a different room altogether. The results were striking. In both tests, the subjects whose phones were in view posted the worst scores, while those who left their phones in a different room did the best. The students who kept their phones in their pockets or bags came out in the middle. The study showed as the phone's proximity increased, brain power decreased. In subsequent interviews, nearly all the participants said that their phones had not been a distraction, that they hadn't even thought about the devices during the experiment. They remained oblivious even as the phones disrupted their focus and thinking. Second experiment conducted by the researchers produced similar results while also revealing that the more heavily students relied on their phones in their everyday lives, the greater the cognitive penalty they suffered. Our attachment to our phones has grown so intense that their mere presence diminishes intelligence. Dr. Ward and his colleagues wrote that the integration of smartphones into daily life appears to cause a brain drain that can diminish such vital mental skills as learning, logical reasoning, abstract thought, problem solving, and creativity. People who had their phones in view, albeit even turned off, during 2 demanding tests of attention and cognition made significantly more errors than did a control group whose phones remained out of sight altogether. The 2 groups performed about the same on a test of easy questions. Researchers examined how smartphones affected learning in a lecture class with 160 students at the University of Arkansas in Monticello. They found that students who didn't bring their phones to the classroom scored a full letter grade higher on a test of the material presented than those who brought their phones. It didn't matter whether the students who had their phones used them or not. All of them scored equally poorly just by having them in their possession. Study of 91 secondary schools in the UK, this was published in the journal Labor Economics, found that when schools ban smartphones, students' examination scores go up substantially, with the weakest students benefiting the most. Using devices, quotes, normally significantly reduces your brain's capacity to process information. According to a study from the University of London, multitasking actually reduces your IQ, with multitasking men dropping an average of 15 points, effectively giving them the same cognitive capabilities as an 8-year-old child. So we wonder why some men act like 8-year-olds. This can be the reason. Researchers at the University of Sussex in the UK compared the amount of time people spend on multiple devices, such as texting while watching TV, to MRI scans of their brains. They found that these device users had less brain density in the anterior cingulate cortex, a region responsible for empathy, as well as cognitive and emotional control. So we wonder why they're not able to empathize with others, this generation. We wonder why they can't seem to control their emotions. In a study conducted at the University of Essex in the UK, 142 participants were divided into pairs and asked to converse in private for 10 minutes. Half talked with a phone in the room, while half had no phone present. The subjects were then given tests of affinity, trust, and empathy. The mere presence of mobile phones inhibited the development of interpersonal closeness and trust. By the way, we talked on Thursday night about families. One of the reasons why there's less interpersonal closeness and trust is this very device. The mobile phones also diminished the extent to which individuals felt empathy and understanding from their partners. The downsides were strongest when a personally meaningful topic was being discussed. So you're trying to discuss a personally meaningful topic and someone is fooling with their phone. Of the 6 current generations alive today, each successive generation believes they are more digitally savvy. Each successive generation is actually, however, less focused and has lower attention spans. And each successive generation has less ability to manage their emotions. What about memory? People's knowledge and understanding may actually dwindle as gadgets grant them easier access to online data stores. Memory experts had a group of volunteers read 40 brief factual statements. Half the people were told the machine would save what they typed, so they're trying to remember it by typing it in. Half were told the statements would be immediately erased after they typed it in. Afterward, the researchers asked the subjects to write down as many of the statements as they could remember. Those who believed that the facts had been recorded in the computer demonstrated much weaker recall than those who assumed the facts would not be stored. Anticipating that information would be readily available in digital form seemed to reduce the mental effort that people made to remember it. The researchers dubbed this phenomena the what? The Google effect. Because search engines are continually available to us, we may often be in a state of not feeling that we need to encode the information internally. When we need it, we will what? Look it up. But the problem is the art of remembering is the art of thinking. In other words, to remember something and to memorize something, we have to associate it with something else. By the way, this is one of the reasons why our students at Weimar College excel on the MCAT exam. By the way, Weimar is the college where if you go to pre-med, you're most likely to get into medical school. out of any college that we know of. It's a very high, well over 90% chance that you're going to get into a U.S. medical school here. But one of the reasons is because the pre-med course curriculum is taking an MCAT in is science intensive. And we teach chemistry, we teach organic chemistry, general chemistry, biochemistry. These are all on the MCAT. And we have a teacher, in fact, she needs to take a sabbatical to write a textbook because it's so profound, but she puts these complex chemical concepts and parallels them with biblical theological principles. And so she'll begin a worship talk in her chemistry course with a biblical theological principle and then illustrate the chemical concept that she's going to cover that day. And so the MCAT exam is kind of an IQ test once you know the basic science. And so when our students, like other students, see a question that they know they've never seen before, and they say, I don't know how to solve this. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm not even sure what this is talking about. But then as they look at it more carefully, they'll see enough of the chemistry there that then the biblical concept will come into mind. When the biblical concept comes into mind, then the chemistry equation that fits that biblical concept will come into mind, and they'll be able to solve the problem and get the question right. And so remember, the art of remembering is the art of what? Thinking. And because students feel they don't have to memorize anything because they can just look it up, they're actually thinking. Their thinking has gone away. And thus they're not able to really think for themselves. If there is thinking going on in them, it's because they've seen someone else actually think this particular way. And they're not able to really think outside of the box because memorization is such at an all-time low. And many of you that were raised in a generation without these devices, I know I used to have several hundred phone numbers memorized, I could spit out, if someone said a name, I could spit out a phone number. Or I could, there was a department in the hospital, I knew exactly what that department extension was to all sorts of different things. And now, people sometimes don't even know their own number. And it's like, well, I never call myself, let me look it up here. And so they have to look that up as well. But only by encoding information in our biological memory can we weave the rich intellectual associations that form the essence of personal knowledge and give rise to critical and conceptual thinking. No matter how much memory swirls around us, the less well-stocked our memory, the less we have to think with. When people call up information through their devices, they often end up suffering from delusions of intelligence, studies show. The advent of the information age seems to have created a generation of people who feel they know more than ever before, the scholars concluded, even though they may know even less about the world around them. That insight sheds light on our society's current gullibility crisis, in which people are all too quick to credit lies and half-truths spread through social media or news outlets. If media and devices have sapped your powers of discernment, you'll believe anything you are told by them. There's a large study called Monitoring the Future. It's a major survey looking at the lives of more than how many young people now? 1 million. Study showed that teens who spend large amounts of time glued to their phone and computer screens are markedly less happy than those who prefer real-world activities and interactions. Using social media, texting, video chatting, multi-platform video games, all associated with less happiness, not with more happiness. The study's author said, although observational studies cannot prove causation, several other studies have shown that more social media use leads to unhappiness, but unhappiness does not lead to more social media use. Youth who invested more time in non-screen activities, such as playing sports and real sports in 3D. By the way, go to a high school today, and if they're not actually part of the sports team and things like that, you'll find three-dimensional abilities at an all-time low in this group of young people. They can be very good in a 2D way. I mean, they can type in furiously in 2 dimensions and come up with all sorts of things like that, but actually have them chase a ball down in a tennis court, and it's pitiful. They don't know what they can't do it. And part of that whole aspect of things really is because of being raised in this just 2-dimensional environment. But anyways, playing sports, reading newspapers, face-to-face social interaction, all significantly associated with greater happiness. And I'll just tell you, in our program, we have many adults. This isn't just a Generation YZ issue. This is also an X in some of the adults. But the biggest struggle we have with people is the rule that they have to give up their phones and laptops and iPads when they come into our program. And we do give them back to them for about a half hour a day, most days. There's about 3 days we tell them ahead of time they're not going to get their devices back. But they say, wait a minute, I'm here for depression and anxiety, and this is going to make me a lot more anxious and depressed to not have this. And they'll give all sorts of reasons, and there'll be even, cheating that goes on. They've heard about it ahead of time, so they'll bring 2 smartphones and they'll turn one in. And so they can have that one there. By the way, some of those scores that you saw that were not so good, those are people that are actually cheating in the 10-day program. And they think they're getting by with it, but their scores indicate that they're not. But the amazing thing is, if they actually comply and don't utilize that phone and they think their life is going to end, in fact, many of them will say, because there's some that we put on a fast as well. We didn't get into fasting, but that's a whole other area of helping neuroplasticity is some fasting. Not everyone fasts that comes into the program, but some do. And they'll say, I'd rather not eat for 10 days than you take my phone away for 10 days. That's how attached to their phone they are. And by the way, the story I told Thursday night about the 16-year-old who attempted suicide because her mother took away her smartphone that morning. Someone here told me about a friend of theirs or an acquaintance whose mother took their phone away from them and attempted to jump out of the car going down the highway to end their life because their phone was taken away. That's how addicted these people are. But anyways, the life satisfaction, self-worth, happiness of young people in the U.S. plummeted after 2012, the year when the proportion of Americans owning a smartphone rose above 50%. The happiest teenagers were those who used digital media, how much? Less than an hour a day. After a daily hour of screen time, levels of unhappiness rose steadily. By far the largest change in teens' lives between 2012 and 2016 was the increase in the amount of time they spent on digital media and the subsequent decline in in-person social activities and sleep. The advent of the smartphone and the increased use of other screens is the most plausible explanation for the sudden decrease in teens' psychological well-being. And of course, along with this phone aspect of things in regards to the mental illness, you are seeing cutting also, self-mutilation at an all-time high. This is something you do in isolation. And you post a picture of yourself up there, expect to see a lot of likes, and then you see some dislikes, and you see some things that you didn't want them to say, and they can't handle that emotionally, and they start getting their knife out and self-punishing and things of that nature. So the key to digital media use and happiness is limited use and intelligent use, which we'll get into. Aim to spend no more than 2 hours a day on digital media, said the lead author, although his study said 1 hour. Try to increase the amount of time you spend seeing friends face-to-face, physically exercise, and those are 2 activities reliably linked to greater happiness. So there is a group of experts and individuals who have looked at these studies, and I didn't go through other studies, I can show you the references, and are calling on parents, teachers, and governments to ban the use of all handheld devices and screens for children under the age of 12 years. And they actually give 10 reasons in this reference. I boiled it down to 7. There's 3 of them that are a little weak, I thought, so I didn't put them up there. But between 0 and 2, infants' brains triple in size and continue a state of rapid development to 21 years of age. Early brain development is determined by environmental stimuli or lack thereof. Stimulation to a developing brain caused by overexposure to technologies has been shown to be associated with executive functioning and attention deficit, cognitive delays, impaired learning, increased impulsivity, and decreased ability to self-regulate. All due to this overexposure of technologies. And for instance, more tantrums will result. Number 2, delayed development. Technology use restricts movement, which results in delayed development. 1 in 3 children now enter school developmentally delayed, far higher than ever before. And most of those are using iPads, from age 2 on. Movement enhances attention and learning ability. Use of technology on the age of 12 is detrimental to child development and learning. Third is the obesity epidemic, also tied in. I won't go into that in too much detail. Number 4, sleep deprivation. And it's very clear that these devices rob kids of sleep, particularly when they're used an hour before bedtime. And what's best is not using them for at least 3 hours before bedtime. 40% of adolescents get less than 7 hours of sleep a night on average. And that continues to worsen from 1991 on. This shift in sleeping habits directly attributable to increased internet use. Teens who use the web for at least 5 hours a day, 50% more likely to get insufficient sleep than peers who spend only an hour a day. And then mental illness, it's clear rising rates of child depression, anxiety, attachment disorders are at an all-time high because of these devices. Attention deficit, autism, bipolar disorder, psychosis, and problematic child behavior. 1 in 6 Canadian children now have a diagnosable mental illness, many of whom are on dangerous psychotropic drugs. So they come in with these problems and they're put on drugs at an early age. 6, digital dementia. High-speed media content can contribute to attention deficit as well as decreased concentration and memory due to brain pruning neuronal tracts to the frontal cortex. Children who can't pay attention can't learn. And since these devices are so distracting, they're not used to paying attention to anything for more than 2 or 3 minutes, and that doesn't allow them to build up the ability to have that focused attention for learning and memory. And 7, the addictive aspect of it. As parents attach more and more to technology, they are detaching from their children, and in the absence of parental attachment, detached children also attach to devices, which result in addiction. 1 in 11 children were addicted to technology even before 2009. So of course, all of this is concerning for our present generations. We now have the highest rates of mental illness ever in America, lowest scores ever in emotional intelligence, but yet this generation think they're the most informed generation, and they also have the greatest pride in their own abilities. The evidence is that they're the least informed and the most gullible generation, but we cannot just give them up as doomed. There's a book called Reset Your Child's Brain. By the way, if you want to, this is actually a good book in regards to putting this into practice. I think I brought it with me here. This is a psychiatrist in LA who will not diagnose even autism, ADHD, or any of these things in her adolescence or child psychiatry, which she's an adolescent child psychiatrist, until they are screen-free for 6 weeks. She says often the diagnosis completely resolves and there's no mental illness when you take the screens away from them for 6 weeks. And then she says this is hard. It requires a village. You're going to have to go through your school systems. You're going to have to go through this. And so she puts through the last half of the book is an implementation program on how to implement it and be very particular about keeping it implemented. And then after that, you have to use it just intelligently. One of the ways is by batching all email activities at set times throughout your day. Outside of those times, don't check your email box because, again, that's going to be distraction. Segregate action items and to-do items so that you can crush each group separately. Multitasking has proven to be inefficient, so segregating items is a much better pathway to follow. For tasks that require intense focus, you need to turn off and remove yourself from all digital distractions. Activities such as writing personalized emails, writing reports, creating marketing copy, conducting research all require freedom to think. This also goes for more routine activities such as organizing files or preparing presentations. Start by planning your time accordingly. If you need an hour to do a task, block out the time in advance so you're both prepared and free from distractions. And before settling down, make sure you have all the materials ready so that you can be efficient. And when you're ready to start, tune out and turn off any digital distractions that might plague you. This includes any notifications such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, email box, news notifications. And what we're showing is students who, they have to go online, do their homework. Within 5 minutes, they're not doing their homework. Although they had perfect motivation to start out with, I'm just going online to do my homework. But then there's all these notifications that come in. Donald Trump just said something about another woman. What did he say? Well, they have to go in and take a look. And then my friend just gave me a chat, and asking me about whether I have the notes from today's class and those sorts of things. So the key to success, the circuitry for paying attention is identical for the circuits for managing distressing emotions. And so Daniel Goleman says, attentional circuitry needs to have the experience of sustained episodes of concentration, reading the text, understanding and listening to what the teacher is saying in order to build the mental models that create someone who is well educated. And one of the keys to success is a digital Sabbath every day, sometime when kids, and I should say adults also, aren't being distracted by devices at all and are engaged in focused learning. So electronic fasts is what is recommended by Victoria Dunkley and others, and I won't go into all of the aspects in regards to electronic fast, but I can tell you for those that we've recommended it, they're wondering, they have doubt and uncertainty. Is it going to work for me? Is this, how much of it is having an effect? I really don't want to do this. It seems like it's going to be pretty involved. And so we have to deal with the doubts and skepticisms of others that need to cooperate. But will it be worth making a change? How much benefit will I get? Impacts and benefits are actually both direct and indirect, but you can't be sure how beneficial it will be until what? Until you do it. The more anxiety and anger you or your children have over making this change, the more a decided change is needed. Studies show. My family's reaction will be negative, provoking rage, depression, or aggression. So is it worth it? My child or spouse might hate me for taking their media devices away. I've heard this one, I will lose bonding time with my spouse, child, or friend since this is what we do together. Sit there quietly in a home looking at the devices. This could separate or isolate me from my child or peers who continue to use their devices without limitations. Seems too hard to accomplish since electronic devices are everywhere. I don't want to cut back or change my own media experiences. I might get more stressed and exhausted. And convincing others that could help my child will benefit from media fast might be difficult. Getting rid of my movies, iPads, and smartphones seems too difficult. But the short-term benefits are clear. Studies show your mood is happier, you're more emotionally stable, you're less irritable, you're better able to focus, you're more organized, improved stress tolerance, more creative, less impulsive, more compliant, you'll be better rested, you'll be more physically active, you'll save money, and there'll be less medication use, and less household stress, and more family bonding. Long-term benefits, optimize academic career and creative potential. You'll be more responsible, you'll be more empathetic. The studies show when you do a screen fast, even children are able to empathize with other adults and children much better after just a few days. Better relationship partner, improved cortisol levels, improved memory. And one of the nice things is you can go places without risking meltdowns in public with your kids. So decide today to e-fast. Make a wise and significant plan. Implement it soon. Count at least 6 weeks. Reevaluate, then use it only smartly and aim for less than 1 hour a day. Now, not everyone needs to do the e-fast, but if you have some of the symptoms related to this, or if you think that there might be an addiction, even if you think there might be, it's worth it in going through all of this. I know, I think the schools of the future that are going to be advanced are the schools that actually start going back to analog. And actually, it will be very helpful to parents as well, because when they come home, they always need to be on their device to see what their assignment actually was, or to read the book there, and all of those sorts of things. And so the parents think they have to be online. But if it's an analog school, the parents will know that they don't have to be online. And it can help them as well. Any questions, comments about what we've presented? Yes. Go ahead.
So in practical ways, how do you approach to parents or kids to explain this knowledge? How do you have any sort of structure? What is your first thoughts? Because it's so easy to say it among us, but how about the outside world who have kids in children receiving home, who have kids in critical conditions that don't have a functional mom and dad? Sometimes they're CPS cases, sometimes they're probation cases. So I'm thinking, how do we make that to
Yeah.
the outside?
Well, the first thing is education. You know, in a way, you know, I was just thinking the other day, if our drinking water had lead in it, and by the way, lead is not as bad on what it does to the brain than what you've just seen. And so, you know, if our drinking water had lead in it and it was pervasive everywhere, what would we do? We'd have to educate people on what lead does, and we'd have to then ask for cooperation in regards to getting the lead out of the system. But with this, what happened, and this was kind of a mistake that humanity made, these drugs, they're really drugs, were put on society where we only looked at the benefits and we didn't look at the risks. And can you imagine an FDA drug being released where we found out the researchers never looked for any problems that the drug might cause? And then after it's released, we find out about all these problems that are being caused. We would think it was one of the most unethical, greedy drug companies ever, and they would be crucified publicly and otherwise for doing that. And of course, you know, as Flint, Michigan was crucified for the lead type of thing. But what you have just seen, I mean, when we have mental illnesses, it used to be 5%, and now it's 60% of our college students. And when we're seeing the evidence of what's it doing to concentration spans, attention, empathy, all of these things, the first rule is we need to educate our parents, we need to educate our children, we need to educate a large portion of society, and then we need to work on implementation. And the implementation is going to require some effort. Just like if Weimar's water supply had all sorts of lead in it, it's going to require some joint effort to change that whole thing, and we'd have to be doing all sorts of extreme measures to do that. And so I think the evidence is clear enough that it's time for us to educate. And you know, I'll just tell you, I gave this lecture to a group of, I'll give you more of the story tomorrow because it's not just related to this. This is just a small part of the story. But I gave this to an entire nation's high school principals and school counselors just a few weeks ago. And they were dumbfounded, but they agreed. It all made sense to them. And they were being pushed by their higher-ups to have more, to get rid of books in the classroom, to not have anything like that, and everything with devices. And they say, we need to back up, and we need to schedule a meeting right away on what we're going to do to back this whole thing up and change, because we're going the wrong direction. And so, but it's going to require some joint effort. And it's not necessarily simple, you're right. It's not necessarily simple. Yes?
Just recently I heard where a top Facebook and Google executive that were in the groundworks of their company that are no longer with those companies come out on big documentary coming out with Katie Couric on this subject, how
Yeah.
damaging it is.
Even if they didn't try to build in addiction. Of course, we know video games and all that kind of stuff, they're trying to build in addictions with that.
They want you to click.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the easiest way to make money in America is to create something that is frontal lobe suppressing and addictive. You know, why does the alcohol industry do so well? I mean, you know, it's frontal lobe suppressing and it's addictive. And the people creating the video games, all of that sort of stuff, that's the easy money. Go ahead.
So, like I understand, like in South Korea, for example, from elementary school, they've got rid of textbooks and they use tablets to learn on. Is there data that shows that there's a difference between reading a paper book, let's say, versus a Kindle?
Yes. Yeah, there is. I could have presented a lot more data on this, but there has been studies reading printed books versus reading on screens or Kindles. And where the biggest difference has been looked at is in regards to sleep. When you read a printed book, your retention rate is slightly better, but what's even more impressive is you're able to go to sleep much easier than if you read off of a Kindle and a screen, particularly the hour before going to bed. So it delays your sleep time, it delays the efficiency, and those sorts of things. So printed books are actually superior. Another aspect is, one of the consequences that I didn't mention, is that kids don't know how to write anymore. They know how to type, but they are even getting rid of handwriting classes. It's like we don't need handwriting classes anymore. Well, the studies show that if you write something down, you're much more likely to remember it than if you type it in. And so even today, if I'm learning at a continuing medical education event, I'm going to be writing it down, so I'm more likely to remember it. And then if I want to make sure I keep it, I'll take a picture of it and store it on a media device so I can go back to it. But that is actually the best way of learning. And there's been some nice studies done on that, writing versus typing it in. And writing involves that 3 dimensions. You have to, you know, push in and things like that. There's a little more 3-dimensional activity in the actual writing part. Yes?
So given, you know, this research indicating the problems with it, but also the reality of what we live in where technology is used so much in business, I mean, even in hospital systems, you have to type, you know, patient notes and everything down. What's the recommended approach for giving students the preparation for the professional world?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I think we have found out is how quickly these students can bind on to technology. I think one of the things we were thinking before is if we go strictly analog, how in the world are they going to be able to know how to even do a Google search, you know, or a wise Google search or those type of things. Actually, that's pretty basic and rudimentary and not near as complex as what we might think it is. And if we have them the ability to think, to teach them the technology side of things is going to be pretty straightforward. But in the other side of things, I'm not necessarily advocating that we never use these devices. Obviously, even to do the research, you know, I did the device. I mean, I used a laptop and did some of the research on this. But it's the intelligent use. And so when I'm doing things like this, I don't want email notifications on. In fact, you know, one of the limitations I have, maybe, as being president of this place, is my secretary knows that I may not see her emails. I'm going to look once a day at a particular time, and I'm going to try to knock it out quickly. But I'm not going to, there's not, you know, there's no Facebook notifications, there's no things like that that continually distract me. Now, you know, if I'm working in a hospital setting and there's patient types of situations, I'm going to have the nurses be able to page me and text me and things like that. Those are crucial, time-sensitive types of things. But, you know, if we're doing administrative types of things, if they need me that bad, they can call me, you know. And that's another thing, you know, there are people catching up with this information. There was a company who did a little bit of education and then came out with what's called dead phones. A dead phone is an old-fashioned phone where it's just a phone that you can pick up. I think you can text on it too. but there's no, bright screen, there's no thing like that. They came out with 170,000 of them, and they were all bought up within 3 days, completely sold out. And so that's another way of going. But we still want to be able to do good research and find things on the internet. But we want to be able to do it intelligently and not getting our focus of attention adversely affected. Because as we start adversely affecting our ability to focus and concentrate, we are going to adversely affect our ability to manage distressing emotions, because it's the same area there. And the sad thing about it is we are, instead of trying to change the focus and attention of our young people, we're actually saying, okay, we just need to pack everything into 90 seconds. How can we make this tantalizing and things, because their attention spans are so low. If you've got to get your YouTube video done in 90 seconds, otherwise you're not going to get the young people. And it's kind of like, it's nice to be able to get them for those 90 seconds, but if we really want them to be able to be a person that's well educated, they're going to have to go longer than that, and a lot longer, and if we want them to be able to manage distressing emotions. Okay, a couple more questions, then we probably need to close it down. Yes?
Is there a chance that at some time in the future you would be able to put this lecture on a presentation that we could pick up, so we could take this to our churches and to our community and be able to help start disseminate this information to start the thinking process where...
Yeah, we do have it now. I gave this for the first time a few weeks ago at the Emotional Intelligence Summit, and that is on DVD. And it has a little more information than what I presented here today, and it has all the references, or not DVD, it's video or audio. You can get it either way. And I don't know, is Erica here? Erica is not here, but I think she's going to have an area here where she's going to have some material, and you could order it from there and be able to get it and disseminate it. Oh, she's over there. Okay, right, that table over there. Thank you. Someone's pointing it out. So if you want to go there, you can order that and order it in volume. They're wondering about getting the Generation YZ video too, or getting it ordered, Erica. Yes?
I just wanted to know about the weaning process for a parent. The information like this makes you want to say, okay, that's it, put it all away. But when someone's been doing it for so long, what would you suggest? The automatic cut off, or slowly but surely getting down to a very low amount of media?
Yeah, probably the biggest expert in this area who's had the most experience is this one right here, Victoria Dunkley. And so she's going to recommend preparation first, but then the cold turkey cutoff. It's not a wean. It's cold turkey once you have your ducks in a row to be able to successfully do this approach. And of course, educating your child ahead of time in regards to why you're doing this. This is a loving move on your part, and you're wanting to help the brain, neuroplasticity, get the brain to grow in the right way, and how important that is for his or her future success, and then implementing it that way. Okay, yes?
I don't know if you answered this when I was out, but I heard there's some studies that if you read the book itself, it's much better at retaining the information than reading it electronically. Have you seen our study?
Yes, yeah, we just mentioned a little bit about that. Okay. And one of the nice advantages of reading the book, I know you can underline in other formats, it's a little more difficult, or highlight, but actually underlining, taking notes, those type of things are easier. And I know there's a new computer screen, you can't really do that on an iPad or a smartphone or those types of things very easily. There is a new computer out there, we'd have to see it, but you've probably heard about it. It's a Microsoft computer where you can actually do that. You can do 3D stuff, and you can underline and save and things like that, and it's now outselling the Mac as a result of that. But I think there's going to be issues on that side of things too. So it's nice, and it's actually cheaper in some respects to just get the printed book. Yeah.
Is there guidance on
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, and that also helps to clarify something else. If you are totally focused in what you're doing on a screen, and it's useful, and you're not being distracted, I mean, you can still, a programmer could spend 8 hours a day, as long as he's not answering texts and getting news flashes and getting totally distracted, which the business professionals that are overseeing him are not wanting him to do that anyway. So normally they have rules in the workplace not to do that. You can still do pretty well cognitively because it still requires all that focus to be able to do all of that. But most people don't utilize their computers that way. I see them sometimes even in the hospital where the nurses are on something, but then they're still getting little home messages coming in. That is very adverse in regards to their focus and attention, and it is declining them significantly.
Is there an issue with blue light and melatonin?
And there is an issue with the blue light and melatonin, yes, exactly.
These glasses actually, if you look at them, they actually reflect blue light, so they're supposed to be better if you're working on stuff later at night.
Yes, that's right. Particularly working in the evening, you want to filter out the blue because you'll definitely decrease your melatonin if you don't. But you'll still make more melatonin by reading than you will by being on screen. So we normally recommend if you're a programmer and you're having to be on the screens all day, or you're a nurse and having to be on the screens all day, don't use your screens at night when you go home. I mean, just be done for the day. If you need to do your personalized computerized work, do that in the morning, and not after work. Use the after work time for the social, for the parenting, for the exercise, or for other types of things, and not the computer. Well, you've been a very attentive group. I hope this extra session was helpful. And why don't we bow our heads and